Hi there, USBGF members. Bill Simborg here, again with a challenging problem, and my guest commentator today, who actually came up with this problem for us, is Mary Hickey, two-time U.S. Open champion and one of the top players, teachers, and authors in the world, and a good friend. Mary, take it from here. Tell us about this position.
Thank you, Phil, and thank you for setting up these videos for the members of USBGF. And, well, this one is a problem where we've got to think about, as we did in a previous one I did here, about our game plan, and also to be aware, in this case, of what our opponent's game plan is that we're not looking good here, even if we don't have that friendly pip counter telling us that we're behind the race. We could take a look at this and know. And so what we would have really liked to have done, since we've got him back where we want him, is to have maybe run that back checker, or at least put it up onto the 4-point so that we could run with it later. But instead, we're sitting there like a sitting duck waiting to get pointed on, and then for him to use the time he buys pointing on us while we're struggling to re-enter, for him to just scoot away. And then we're going to get into a bad position where we have to pass a cue. Well, we don't want to do that. So it's time for a change of pace. And even though that back checker is kind of where we want him already, we have to attack it anyway because we don't want to let him carry out his evil plan of stomping on our back checker, which we can't move. So the 4 is pretty much forced once we realize what our game plan is. And then, or what his game plan is, and that our game plan is to avoid it happening. And then we have to think about what we're going to do with the other part of the roll, with the 3. And it can be tempting to consider 8-5, and I think players from the 70s would tend to do that. They would count the builders and realize that it's pretty good to have an additional builder because you do want to cover it as quickly as you can. But there's something else to look at here, is that if we want to continue the attack, we're going to need more checkers. We've got 3 men back. If we're hit, the attack's over anyway. And if we're not hit, though, we need to get everybody we can into action. And so we have to consider at least letting the midpoint go, even though it's still useful. And in the previous video I did here, the midpoint was more expendable than it is in this case. In this case, the back checker is really kind of doing it a safe haven. And also the fact he's only got 2 checkers on his midpoint means that the pressure we're exerting on it with our midpoint is more meaningful. But just the same, despite all those factors in favor of keeping the midpoint, it's got to go, simply because we only have 15 checkers to work with, and they are more badly needed at where the action is, which is going to be in our inner board once we've made the hit. So that is the correct play here, and we just have to let it go. And I can't resist adding that plays like this, I sometimes put in a folder called midpoint iconoclasm. Now, I came up with that term, and Chuck Bauer came up with it independently. And if you're listening, Chuck Bauer, you don't get to claim this term for yourself. You had your 15 minutes of backgammon fame with the term splot, meaning a slot accompanied by a split. And, that's good enough. Leave this one alone, Chuck.
You're telling me that you and Chuck both came up with the term iconoclasm for a play like this?
Yeah, midpoint iconoclasm specifically.
Independently.
Well, unless he plagiarized it from me, but I
mean, that's amazing. I mean, it never would have occurred. What does iconoclasm mean?
Well, in history, it meant smashing icons, and it originally meant religious ones, but now it can be pretty much anything, any kind of thing that's considered an icon.
I see. So you're smashing the whole idea that you have to hold that midpoint.
Right. Yeah. As long as back checkers or.
I see. Show the right play. Show us the evaluation.
Here we go. And this is with a rollout, and who are we to question a rollout by XG?
Okay, so you started out with an assumption that you had to hit. And as we all know, there's basically 3 major game plans you have to choose from: racing, priming, and hitting. And you rule out racing because you're so far down in the race, and it's pretty difficult to extricate those last 3 checkers.
Especially with a roll that doesn't legally go on.
Yeah, but what you also did is you ruled out priming, and if you were going to try to play a priming game here, then the play would be to bring 2 down and hope you can hold that checker that's on your 2 point and keep him from escaping, because you can really only escape with a 5 or a 1-6 if you play a priming game. And so what's wrong with that? Why did you assume you must hit?
Partly because of what we said about his evil game plan over there, is that if he can distract us long enough while building his board, we're in pretty tough shape. We're going to be playing a 21 anchor game with an additional checker either on the bar or perhaps in the back somewhere, or even it does enter on the anchor, but then he is run. We're going to have to pass. And we don't want to get there, and we don't want to let him put his nice builders to work. We don't want to let him carry out his game plan. So stopping him is part of it. And that's an important concept in backgammon, too, is recognizing when the alarm bell is sounding and that you've got to do something to change the direction of things because it's sliding.
Okay, well, you just hit one of my alarm bells. One of the problems I have with this position, this is, by the way, it is set up as a money game, not match play, and the cube is in the center, and one of the alarms that's ringing in my head is I'm scared that he's going to double me no matter what I do. And what does happen, what is the cube action after you make, is there going to be a cube for him with any play you make, or did you stop the cube by hitting?
I think you've probably have stopped the cube anyway. I didn't check this out, but if we look at these numbers, the minus 0.31, let's shade it here, that our chance of winning still being 42%, that would be a pretty risky cube. And I mean, in your chouette, I'm sure you've got somebody who would throw it out there. But what you should do is just be happy that they didn't wait till the position was a lot more challenging for you. They get an easy decision.
I see.
Even with play B here, you're still at 40%. And this isn't a case where you would be having to activate the gammon with the Jacobi rule. And by the way, that's another misconception people have, is that there are actually not that many positions where you would double just because of the Jacobi rule, where it wasn't a cube anyway.
So if you uncheck the Jacobi rule, most of these positions, you're going to have the same decisions.
The same cube actions, yes. And
interesting.
It tends to be only things that are at the dragon border that are going to flip. And it's not something that we have to study in any depth, really. For one thing, the Jacobi rule may eventually disappear.
Let me ask you one other question that I'm really curious about. Underneath the best play, you have this green bar. And I never use the green bar. I prefer to show how many wins, gammons, and backgammons there are for each play in comparison, and that gives me greater insights. Why aren't you showing those numbers? Why do you use the green bar?
Yeah, well, actually, I don't have any trouble at all. I have a very fast chip, and I can just immediately get the numbers when I want them. The numbers are here implicitly on the green bar, because the yellow portion here is the gammons. And if there were any backgammons to speak of, there would be a little red thing at the end, which would be the backgammons. And so you get a visual picture of it anyway. Some of my students strongly prefer this. One of them affectionately refers to this thing as the pickle. And that when the pickle is starting to look kind of sickly and ready to be thrown out because there's a lot of gammons, that tells him something. And the red part's a pimento.
Okay, so what this is showing is that the play that you prefer is going to get you gammon more than playing 2 down, but you win less.
Yes, and so you have to trade off games and gammons. And so we, in general, with things like that, we tend to, if the cube we have access to the cube, we're going to tend to go with the wins, though not always. Sometimes we go with a play that's more gammonish because the threat of the gammon is going to be what makes our cube strong. So it's like everything else in backgammon. It's a rule that applies except when it doesn't.
Okay, but this also illustrates another point that you and I take for granted, that players who maybe some beginners and intermediates don't realize. Even though you might be gammon more here, keep in mind that gammons are in a money game or normal match scores are only worth 0.5 or 50% are only half as important as the wins and winning and losing the game. So if you can have an increase in gammons and still be the right play if you have an equal or even half as much of an increase in the wins. So in this case, the play that you would make if there were no gammons at all, which is called the DMP play, the play you would make a double match point, as Stick likes to say, is often the right play. If you're when in doubt, make the DMP play, and I think this illustrates that argument quite a bit as well.
Yes, that's another one that we use with caution, of course, but yes, and certainly be aware of what the DMP play is if you're able to be. And that's not always abundantly clear either. Mm-hmm. You can't always tell what's going to make you win more. But this one, really, what we're thinking in terms of is what's going to make you lose less.
Yeah. And now, again, another way I look at this position is if you were to take black's checkers on black's side of the board that are on his 4, 5, 6, his 5, 6, 7, and 8 points, and make them less spread out, and you stack them up more so that he doesn't have as many options to attack, you might have different plays. One of the major reasons that Mary is hitting here, and that Extreme Gammon is telling us to hit here, is to take away half of your opponent's roll so he can't point on you and do wonderful things on his side of the board. You're taking away half the roll, and there's another major thing that's going on here that people often forget about. When you hit, 25% of the time, black doesn't even come in, and when that happens, wow, have you got some momentum to go forward. You might extricate a checker, you might make another point, you clearly have a great chance to cover the blot on the 2 point. All kinds of things happen that 25%. And even if your opponent doesn't do something fantastic when you don't hit, they're going to gain somehow in a way. There's no chance of that, of them not being able to move, not being able to do something. So when you don't hit, maybe black does roll a 5 and starts escaping, or does roll that 1, 6 and starts escaping. And of course, there's all those numbers that hit you on the other side of the board. Anything else on this one, Mary? This is a great position. Really, really interesting.
Well, I think that I guess what I would just recommend is people do what we said with other positions is if you have questions about it, set it up in XG and mess with it. And if you don't have XG, get it.
Got it. XG can be found at www.extremegammon.com, and we have no problem making a little commercial for Extreme Gammon. It's been proven very clearly to be the best software out there. It's far less expensive than Snowy used to be, and there's another free software out there called GNU, which is also not bad at all. Works pretty good. One of the reasons we endorse the Extreme Gammon is because if you're a member of the USBGF, be sure you note that, because you get a 20% discount when you buy Extreme Gammon. Tell them Phil sent you. That's one of the drop-down screens when you buy it, and you can tell them that Phil Simborg sent you, and I get rich. I get a $5 commission. I want to make sure I put that on the tape so people don't think I'm being self-serving and sneaky about recommending Extreme Gammon. Mary?
He'll buy you a sandwich at the next tournament for $5, so that you'll not feel that he was doing this just to line his pockets.
The truth is, he does more than that. When I come to the Ohio tournament, Xavier is the developer of Extreme Gammon. He takes me out to dinner just about every year. And last time we went to a place called Johnny's, and we started out with the foie gras and went with a great bottle of wine. So it's a lot more than a sandwich that he buys me every year. It's really, I think it's... I
meant that you would buy people that bought XG.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll certainly be happy to give him a little help with that. That's true.
And also, Phil can help you with settings and stuff, like getting... Well, like we talked about this, like, do you want to have a green bar, or do you want to have the numbers all appear immediately? That's up to you. And but Phil can help you with all that stuff.
Great. Mary, thank you for your time, and appreciate it. We'll see Mary again in other positions, and look forward to doing this more in the future. Bye-bye.